This is a video on the repair of a line drive board for the 950 series of Vitrek testers. If you look at this board, there are 8 transistors running down the center of this board, and usually you want to change all 8 at once. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to change these 4, Q1, 2, 3, and 4, just to demonstrate how to do it. The first thing to do is I come in here with a little solder, and this just helps with the heat transfer. And you want to pull the pins up so you can get these loose later. So we're going to pull those pins up. On all 4 of these transistors.
Well, if we remember to look, it comes back.
Okay, now that we have all 4 of these transistors with the pins loose, the next thing we want to do is to remove these 2 heat sinks from the transistors Q1 and Q2. On early versions of this board, this heat sink is not here on Q2, but the latest boards have 2 heat sinks. So the first thing you want to do is to, again, put a little solder onto the side here. That just helps with the heat transfer. Lift that side up, get it free, and then we'll come over here. Now there's another component right here that's kind of close, so you have to be careful on this one here. And we'll get that heat sink out of there. And then this one is next. Okay, the next thing you want to do is, again, you want to flow a little bit of solder on these transistors so that the heat transfers. And it'll take a little while for these to heat up. You have to just be patient and get them hot enough so they'll just lift off. This one you have to be careful not to get your soldering iron too close to this capacitor because you're really close there. So okay, now that you have the transistors off, you want to kind of smooth out the solder so that it will accept the new transistor. A lot of times I'll tip the board this direction just to let the solder flow downhill towards the back of the board. Now, these two transistors are the same part number. I'll list the part numbers for you. And they're static sensitive, so you want to make sure to observe static procedure on changing these. I'll drop off two of these transistors onto the board. And then line it up. There's a little white band right here. You'll line up the transistor with that little white band. And then tack it in place here. Well, usually there's enough solder left over, or you can just tack them in place. See, that's nice and solid. And then I'll do this one right away again too. Okay, now when you go to seat these transistors, and this is very important, you have to put a little bit of solder on here. And you have to heat this until the transistor will lay flat all the way down into the solder. If you don't get it completely melted, the transistor will be suspended up in the air, and you don't want that. So get it hot enough. It's not quite ready here. You can see it start to melt along the edges here. And now you can see it flows right down in there. Okay, so then you take the soldering iron away, and you need to leave pressure on it until it's cured. And then you go to the next one. Okay, there we go. Now the next transistor, these two transistors are a different part number, so you want to make sure to keep these two and these four, all these six are all the same part number. These two are different. Okay, so let's put two transistors down here. And then we'll tack them in place. Again, come in and make sure that they're seated into the solder. Again, being careful of this capacitor. And let it heat up. You got to make sure that it's seated all the way. Quite ready. There it goes. You have to make sure to hold pressure on it until the solder cools and is able to hold it in place. There it goes. Okay. And you might come in and inspect all of your solder connections here to just make sure they're good solder connections on all four of these transistors. And these look pretty good right now. So let's go ahead and reattach the heat sinks. I find that if you pinch them together a little bit and clip them on like that, it works pretty good. Now, you always want to put this one on first, because if you put this one on first, makes it hard to put this one on. Again, we'll put a little solder on here to help with the heat transfer. And then down in place. I'm going to make sure that this is hot enough that the solder flows to get good contact. And then come over here, get this one. Being very careful on this one because you have this little component right here and you don't want to dislodge that. Okay, so when those are in here, then what you want to do is just take a pliers and just kind of straighten these up, make them look nice. And then also this fuse, if these transistors are bad, this fuse will blow. So you need to change that. It's a 5 amp fuse. Then clean it up with a little alcohol and it'll be ready to put back into the unit. See the video on the replacement of the board for how to remove this and reinstall it into the unit itself.